Hello, I am Jonathan Ingo. In August 2020, a cousin of mine was murdered. Around the first anniversary of his death, I thought about one of the last conversations I had with him. Specifically, he mentioned to me that I should do a creative project about our family members. I am going to talk about the impact that my great grandfather and my grandfather had on me. Also, I will be discussing how the death of loved ones in general impacted me. My great grandfather lived into his 90s and he was a well respected man. He cared about family, and his calm demeanor always stood out to me. Growing up, I wanted to be as admired as he was while staying true to myself, and I tried to be like him. When he died in 2016, he died in peace. Before his death, he expressed his desire to be reunited with my great grandmother, who died several years before him. I like to think that they are reunited. My grandfather, the son in law of my great grandfather, was a man who the family loved. He was also a man who battled depression, and he smoked and drank as coping mechanisms. When he died in 2012 due to health issues, I resented him for how he handled his depression. He was someone I decided I didn't want to be like. Ironically, I would later on develop mental health issues due to the death of another loved one. My cousin, great grandfather, and grandfather are all a part of my mom's side of the family, but it was a death on my dad's side that triggered my issues. Particularly, it was my uncle's death in the spring of 2016 when I was a junior in high school. He died of cancer. My parents and I took a trip to visit him when he was sick, and I thought he would make it out okay. On the way home from our trip, he died. The last memory I have of my uncle is of a man fighting for his life. Having that memory started the deterioration of my mental health. For the first time, I felt like a piece of me was gone. At the time, I thought I would eventually be fine soon if I kept moving on like it was just another family death. But the summer of 2016 debunked the notion I had in my head. At that time, in two separate incidents, Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were killed by police. Then soon afterward, at a protest of the killings, police were murdered in downtown Dallas. As a then 17-year-old black male from the Dallas area, learning about those events traumatized me. The day after the murders in Dallas, I was in shutdown mode. Specifically, I was just in my room, sitting, and I stared off into space for several hours. For the next few months of the beginning of my senior year of high school, I had football season as a distraction from my developing mental health issues. However, the end of the season saw the coming of thoughts that led to me feeling lonely and isolated due to my mental state. This continued on to the point where I developed suicidal thoughts towards the end of my senior year of high school. However, I didn't seriously consider committing suicide until my first semester of community college in fall 2017. In October of that season, a former high school classmate of mine died due to injuries she sustained from a car accident. Mentally, knowing someone who died tragically was something I struggled to handle. At her funeral, her journal was read, and she expressed in her writing that she wanted to be a positive example to others. When she was alive, my interactions with her were always positive, and she was one of the kindest people I've ever known. I tried to hold on to the memory of her to benefit my mental health, but it didn't work out well. On the evening of December 28th, 2017, I came home from work at my college bookstore with the intent of killing myself. The plan was to stab myself with a pocket knife and bleed out to death. After thinking more about the situation for some time, I decided to text a friend to tell them that I had been having suicidal thoughts, and they ended up convincing me not to commit suicide. Around that time, that same friend notified a former high school teacher of ours about the situation to help me out, and I had conversations with that teacher that were helpful. Also, I started to open up to others I knew about the night I was going to kill myself. However, I still dealt with suicidal thoughts frequently. On two separate nights in March 2018, I contacted someone I knew to stop me from going through with the urge to kill myself. On the night of March 26, 2018, I sent a concerning message to several people. The next morning, police arrived at my residence and asked about my well-being. I lied and told them that I was doing fine. Later on, I found out that, depending on the answers I gave the police, I could have been taken to a mental hospital. Due to my family's concern, I decided to try counseling for some time to help with my mental health, and it did some good. I started to prioritize self-care, and I made a promise with myself that I would not be self-destructive so others won't be concerned about me and so that I can be a positive influence to people. By the time I transferred to UT Dallas in fall 2019, my mental health was in a great place. However, my mental health issues would resurface after learning about the death of George Floyd and the emotional toll it took on me. As I mentioned in the last short film I made, called My Final Goodbye, I reached out to peers of mine at UT Dallas to have virtual conversations about my experiences as a Black person in America to foster understanding. I am going to discuss certain events in my life since I released my last short film, My Final Goodbye. To be blunt, I was suicidal when I was making that short film. So the title is a reference to my belief that My Final Goodbye would be my last short film before committing suicide. To find a source of hope and inspiration to keep living, I decided to make video interviews this past summer with current students and graduates from my major, the School of Arts, Technology, and Emerging Communication at UT Dallas. Doing the interviews helped for a while, but I continued to struggle mental health-wise going into the fall. Interestingly, this did not negatively affect my performance at school and work this fall semester. However, I will admit that there were 2 nights in particular over the past few months in which I thought I may kill myself. The nights are October 27th and December 6th. To explain why I have dealt with suicidal thoughts this year, it goes back to the death of my uncle, who I mentioned earlier. Growing up, family was instilled in me as my emotional core. However, seeing the death of loved ones growing up, along with my uncle, led to the loss of my emotional core. With the void I have inside, it leads to feeling empty and directionless, which is when thoughts of suicide enter the picture. Even now, I lack an emotional core despite having healthy relationships with others and pursuing things I enjoy. Earlier, I mentioned that I resented my grandfather for how he handled his depression, but because of what I've gone through with my issues, I have forgiven him. I am not mentioning my mental health struggles in order for people to feel sorry for me. I bring it up to tell my story honestly. However, I ask that you as a viewer not be concerned about me. With all that being said, I'm going to describe different scenarios that can play out in my life depending on the choices I make with my mental health. All of them can realistically happen, and these scenarios describe the lifestyle I can lead until my death. The first scenario is that I find a way to overcome my mental health issues to live a better life. The second scenario is that I go back and forth between trying to get better and doing self-destructive behaviors. The third scenario is that I become fully self-destructive. Carried out to its fullest extent, this would lead to me killing myself. The choices I make moving forward will be me carrying out a scenario that I mentioned. I understand that there may be people out there who will try to use my short film against me while disguising their bad intentions for me by claiming a moral high ground. For those who will try to use this against me, ask yourself, could you be as vulnerable and forthcoming about your life publicly as I am? I have nothing to lose by sharing my story, and I'm always willing and ready to defend myself.